Yes, now the Conservative Party conference kicks off this weekend in Birmingham, and one person who will not be attending the Tory Party conference is former Chancellor and leadership candidate Rishi Sunak. An ally of his told the Sunday Times that he was giving Liz Truss, quote, all the space she needs to own the moment.
But can the Tory conference be a success given the pressure faced by the Prime Minister Liz Truss and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng? Well, joining us now is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Do you think that Liz Truss can turn it around and build some momentum around the conference?
Well, she has absolutely no choice. I think what Liz Truss realises is that given the precarity of her position, the fact that she didn't win the MP round in the leadership contest, the fact that she has relatively few allies, the moment she comes to a halt politically, the sharks are going to start closing in. So she and Kwasi Kwarteng have no choice but to push forward and try and get back on the front foot. Now, conference is obviously a chance to do that. A good speech at conference, especially one from the Chancellor, could potentially change the way that her government is perceived, but it's going to be an incredibly fraught, high-wire act for the pair of them to try and make it through the week.
I think when the conference is over, they would have looked back and said, to be honest, that did us more harm than good. Because let's be honest, there are lots of people in Liz Truss's party, lots of MPs, who will be briefing journalists, who will be telling journalists, I actually don't agree with this and I don't, quite frankly, want anything to do with it.
I mean, potentially, yes, but you can't govern the country by hiding from the press and the public forever, much as I'm sure some politicians would like to. I think the briefing is less of an issue because, bluntly, those MPs are briefing journalists anyway because they're all just in London. But I think that the danger for Truss and Kwarteng basically is that each of them will have a big high-profile conference speech. Now, if that goes well, that's a chance to reassure the markets, reassure their own backbenchers, try and communicate their version of what they're doing to the country, which they've been signally bad at doing so far. But if they get that wrong, then they risk baking in incredibly early a public image that they are out of touch, that they have lost control of the economy, and that could cling to the Tories all the way up to the next general election.
We saw those polls, didn't we, yesterday, that put Labour, I think, 17 points ahead, whatever the figure was. It was the biggest gap in 20 years. Is there any way for Conservatives to claw back support before the next general election?
Yeah, there is some. Labour's position is not quite as locked in as it was in, say, the mid-1990s. Most of that lead is Tory voters from 2019 moving to Don't Know rather than moving to Labour, which suggests the Tories could win them back, although I think Liz Truss might struggle given how she's pivoting away from the sort of conservatism that won that 2019 majority. But what Liz Truss is doing is she is gambling on growth. And if that works, and if in 18 months' time we do have an economy that's growing at a fast pace, people are feeling richer, it's creating more jobs, then the voters will reward that because they nearly always reward that. But it is a huge gamble. And I think the big problem for Liz Truss is that for all that she talks about supply-side reform, the supply-side reform we really need is on housing and planning, and Tory MPs won't let her do that.
And do you think that former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been vindicated?
I mean, in as much as he said that this would probably be the market reaction to the sort of proposals that she was talking about during the campaign, yes. I think there were still big questions about whether or not Rishi Sunak had the right political instincts to be a successful Prime Minister. There was a reason that there was a relative lack of enthusiasm for him relative to other first-round candidates. But yes, I think even people who agree with Liz Truss ideologically and on the intellectual basis for her economic policy need to concede that this is a very difficult time to try and do it politically, more than halfway through a parliament, when we've lost 3 years to the pandemic already. You know, a lot of these measures, even if they do work, they're not going to deliver results by the time of the next election. So, yes, I think Rishi Sunak's steady as you go's message during the campaign was more boring. It wasn't necessarily what Tory activists wanted to hear, but it does seem to have been the right thing for the moment.
On that point, do you think that has been some of the challenge with Liz Truss, that she's kind of fundamentally changed the direction of this government without necessarily having that mandate? So she's kind of touted some of these policies around immigration, these tax cuts and so on. And that's not what 2019 was about, and that's not what people voted for. She has to take the public with her, and so far she hasn't necessarily done that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is almost exactly what the problem is. And that's a problem for several reasons. Of course, changing government in the middle of a parliament is completely constitutional. She's under no obligation to seek an election. But it means that Tory MPs, even those who disagree with her, haven't committed to supporting these proposals. It means the House of Lords don't need to let these proposals through. It's a huge problem for her. And normally, in these circumstances, she would go for an early election to win her own mandate. But she can't because she's so far behind in the polls. I think it would have been much wiser for her to spend the next year, 2 years, focusing on delivering on the promises the Tories made in 2019 and then try to win her own mandate after that.